Welcome to Ink and Magic, a podcast where we read and discuss the writing craft, world building, and romance of paranormal and fantasy novels.
If you love books with bite, set in worlds of magic and mayhem, then you're in the right place. My name's Nikisha Shanae. I go by Ines.
And I'm Leslie. I write as Elle Penelope. And welcome to the show.
Hey, Leslie. How is it going with you today?
Hey, Inez. Going pretty well. Excited to talk today.
Yes, today is another craft episode, and we're going to talk about what I think is a phenomenon, but I may have jumped the gun, but I'm calling this Girl on Her Own Horse. One of the first books that I wrote was a Cinderella retelling, but it was with a single mom, which is kind of my favorite thing. So, because I always thought, well, what would happen if Cinderella had been a single mom? She married the wrong guy first, and then she found Mr. Right, but she was a single mom, right?
The bad prince was first, and Prince Charming.
Bad prince first. She kissed the
frog.
Yes, first, and went home with the frog. Realized her mistake, and then she's like, "Well, can I get my prince now?" So I've been fascinated with this idea of Cinderella retellings. And one of my favorite stories that I will watch is one of my bedtime stories that I will watch over and over again is Ever After, starring Drew Barrymore.
Adore Ever After. I have the DVD. I don't even think I have a Blu-ray. It's an old DVD that I have worn out practically watching it so much. Definitely one of my favorite movies.
And in this film, you see, they call it a retelling of Cinderella. And at the time, I was like, yeah, because it was like an empowered Cinderella, because she has her found family of the people that work in her father's household. And she decides to go to the ball, even though they tell a whole backstory of before when she and the prince got to know each other as a secret identity. So she goes, her stepmother tries to keep her from the ball. Cinderella manages to go to the ball, finds the prince. And then, spoiler alert, but all of you should have watched Cinderella, or you really should not be in our crew, for real. So in Ever After, there's the scene where the prince rejects her when he finds out that she's a commoner. And Cinderella gets taken away by the villain. And the prince finally realizes he's been an idiot. And he mounts his horse to save her. And meanwhile, Danielle is the Cinderella's name. Danielle grabs two swords and saves herself and is walking out of the villain's lair as the prince comes up. And she's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "I came to rescue you." But she saved herself. And for a while, I had started to I loved this notion. I remember seeing the film Penelope.
Another one of my favorites.
Right.
Because of the name, if nothing else. But no, it's a great story. And a great design.
Where then again, though, the heroine saves herself. Again, if y'all have not watched Penelope, are you really a part of our crew? Go watch Penelope. Pause, watch Penelope, because I'm about to spoil it. Penelope saves herself. She was cursed to look like a pig. And they were told that she would stay looking like this until she found her true love. And at some point, she looks in the mirror and she's like, "I like myself the way I am, and the curse is broken." She saved herself.
She's her own true love.
She owned her love, fine. And then the last example that I had when I originally was thinking of this was Frozen, which was really about sisterly love. And the guys were like totally on the side, and it was the sister's love that was the saving grace in that film. And I took these three and I was like, look at how the Cinderella story has evolved, with these women no longer being damsels in distress, but they've saved themselves. But I'm like, now that I'm looking back at the original Cinderella story, I think she saved herself in that original story.
And I don't see it. I would like to hear more about how Cinderella saves herself in the original, because Cinderella is one of my favorite tropes. I love Cinderella all day long. Now, I can't always read. Like, I will, if you show me a book that says it's a Cinderella retelling, I will check it out. And if I can get past the first few chapters, then, usually I will like it. But there are a subsection of them where she is just too spineless. She's too much of a doormat. Finding that balance to make Cinderella a heroine and not just a spineless doormat is really difficult. But when it's done well, I adore it. So it's one of my favorite tropes, retellings, whatever you want to call it. I think Ever After works really well with her saving herself, but I do think it's a little bit anomalous. So Go for it. How does she save herself?
So let's think about the original Cindy story. In the original Cindy story, all of these, there's some type of noble suffering. Theodore Taylor calls it noble suffering that is going on. She's stuck in some kind of terrible situation. And in some essence, there's some kind of a makeover that she has to receive. But let's put that aside because I'm not really interested in that. I'm much more interested in how she seizes on the opportunity to get herself to the ball. And
Mhm.
I think this is the start of her saving herself. In all of these retellings that I've just brought up, she gets herself to the ball. She's put the whoever the wicked person is, it's usually a maternal figure. They stand in the way of Cindy getting to the ball, which is the great big thing that she thinks is going to change her life. In Ever After, Danielle's stepmother locks her into a room.
Mhm.
Now, granted, it is Leonardo da Vinci that figures out how to take the pegs out of the door.
Exactly. My point is that she never saves herself because the fairy godmother saves her, or in Ever After's case, Leonardo da Vinci or her friend. Like, she has agency, but it's sort of the heroine's journey. She requires a crew, and allies, friends, found family in order to assist her.
Okay, absolutely. Let me revise. The prince doesn't save her.
Okay.
She and her plucky crew, that's what saves her, not the prince. She's not a damsel getting on somebody's horse.
Yes, I see that. Now, what is exactly is a damsel? Maybe we should define damsel or come up with a definition because whenever you are required to have someone else aside from yourself save you, does that make you a damsel? Regardless of whether that person saving you is a prince or a godmother or some rats.
Well, think about what's always that word doesn't come by itself. Damsel. The
In
damsel is always
distress.
in distress.
Cinderella is definitely in distress.
Mhm.
In the traditional Cinderella stories, yeah, she's locked in a cellar or she's locked in the room or she's prevented by some kind of blackmail from leaving. It's, oh, you're not gonna, whatever the thing is that's keeping her there
Mhm.
in that terrible situation, whether it's quote unquote like the idea of loyalty to this mother figure or loyalty to her father or his legacy, whatever. That's being used against her, so she is in some distress now. Sometimes it's of her own making because she chooses to
Mhm.
stay there. Sometimes she's actually physically locked in a place and someone has to help her and let her out. Now, are they helping her because of her good deeds, because she's befriended these people, because she's been a good person? Maybe. Does that make her not a damsel in distress? I don't know.
But by the time that they help her, is she still a damsel? Because they are helping to take the distress away.
But she requires someone else to take the distress away.
True, but okay, so I think that the only way that she builds the community around herself
Hmm.
by who she is, by the deeds that she does, by what she gives, by how she behaves around them. She gives of herself. She gives of herself, and then these people, just as she came to their aid, they are happy to turn around and come to her aid. So okay, fine, it's a community. She works to build that community. I think that she's always at the center of that community. So she becomes a leader then
Hmm.
in the community that she builds.
Yeah, I
Complete
buy that.
heroine's journey.
Absolutely. And I think that that kind of answers my question. Like, if she's in distress, then she is saving herself by virtue of her actions and her goodness and her character in the past coming to fruition now. So that all leads into, maybe you could say that's her saving herself because she initiated the community that comes to help her.
I think what I'm fixating on that I didn't correctly label, that of course my friend helped me to label, is that he is not saving her.
Right. It's not a situation where the prince comes and saves the day and carries her out of the tower.
No, she makes, and that's why I think I like her, I like the Cindy character so much, is because she takes the initiative. She solves the problems. She doesn't need him to do it. And I'm not dissing on the prince at all because a lot of times he doesn't even know this stuff is going on. I feel like in most of these situations, the prince is presented an opportunity,
Hmm.
and the opportunity of he has made himself who he is, and he has an opportunity that could take her up another level. if only she can either get to the ball or find him again after the ball.
Right. I think there's something to be said about the prince represents like a privilege that she wants access to, a level of societal status, of course, that she, in her drudgery, wants access to. So he's providing something. He's providing a lifestyle and like an upgrade in her circumstances that
Agreed.
is valuable.
Agreed. And that upgrade for us romance fanatics is that HEA, that
Mhm.
happily ever after. If she can get to him, she can he's her reward.
Yeah, and he can provide justice for her evil stepmother and
Mhm.
stepsisters. He can save the farm or whatever, save the employees, save her found family. He can provide access to these benefits that she couldn't access on her own, but they're all part of the reward that she gets for winning him, I guess.
Yes. Yes. And again, we circle back around to none of this happens without her having agency. So in all of those stories that I pointed to before, all of these women, even though they are down on their luck or they have somebody's foot on their neck, usually there's the matriarch, they have some kind of agency, even though it's not a huge amount. They have some and they work it. So with Danielle, she has the community that she has built around herself, and she's scrappy, and her father taught her sword play, and she's willing to not only that, she has all the books that she's read, all this book learning and this intelligence that she has. It's really attractive to the prince. With Penelope, she comes from wealth, but she doesn't have the outward exterior bit of it too. And she's surrounded herself by books as well. Isn't this becoming a pattern? With Frozen, I don't know what was going on in that ice castle, but she had locked herself away too.
I don't remember Frozen that much. Are you considering that a Cinderella story? Because I don't know if I see that.
I'm not calling it so much a Cinderella story, but I'm saying that it deals with women having agency and rescuing themselves.
Okay. So in terms of Frozen, Elsa is the one who rescues herself.
Her and her sister, I feel like they come together
Mhm.
and they kind of rescue each other.
Yeah, it's the sisterly love. When you I mean, that's a good pivot. It's a good like
Mhm.
head fake of you think the story is the story you expect to see, the story you always get, and it's completely different. That is my main takeaway from the one time I saw Frozen many years ago.
And I was just looking at some other ones where I can point to this too. Do you remember? And we both come from film, so we're gonna almost always divert to film before we head over to books. Do you remember Working Girl with
Vaguely.
Melanie Griffith
I saw a
and
play
Harrison Ford?
version of that recently.
I don't know if Leslie can be in our crew if she hasn't seen Working Girl.
No,
Okay,
I
look up.
saw it, but it was in the '80s when I saw it.
It holds up. I strongly encourage you to watch it again. That's a complete Cinderella story in an office.
Mhm.
And the same thing. She the wicked stepmother in that instance is her boss, who's a woman who Tess thinks that she's finally going to be able to get a leg up with her ideas, but no, this woman does her dirty. And we follow the exact same trajectory with her mind, with her ability to see potential deals, and with her go-get-ism, she's able to get the business deal and the guy in her version of this same girl on her own horse, where she rides away with the boon.
Mm.
I remember you and I falling in love with Kristen Kashore's
Oh, yeah,
The
Graceling.
Graceling. Is it the Graceling series?
Graceling was the first book in the series.
Graceling
I'm
was
not
the
sure the
first book.
name of the series.
But that heroine as well, she was an assassin. She had the grace of being able. She had the grace of killing anybody that she came into contact with.
And grace in this world is like a talent, a skill that you're born with.
And she clearly is. She's her hero and her heroine, even though there's a beautiful hero in this story. But let me use Graceland for a second to swap, because the other question that I had was, okay, so you have this strong heroine, who you're going to pair her up with? Can she be paired with an alpha, or
Mhm.
does she need someone more like a beta or a cinnamon roll? And
Right.
I started to take a look at the guys who she was pairing, who these authors and writers were pairing these strong women up with. And I'm calling them more supportive heroes because they could be an alpha or they could be a cinnamon roll or a beta, but I feel like they had some things in common. They were not threatened by her independence, or even if they were an alpha and they were initially threatened by her independence, it quickly started to morph over into an absolute respect
Mhm.
for how she handled her autonomy and how her strength gave her self-sufficiency, but he still found his way into her space and she allowed him into her space.
I think Ever After is a great example of this. I'm always reminded of the scene where they're with the gypsies, I think, and
Mhm.
she ends up carrying him over her. Like
Yes.
they say that you can leave with anything you can carry, and she does him like a fireman's carry and walks away with him. And he's like, "No, you can't do this. It's a little bit of an alpha," but everyone bursts out laughing, and then they're accepted by the community who was trying to rob them at first. So,
And she pulls more community in who
yeah,
comes to help her later.
yeah. Yeah, so it's this heroine's journey that building these resources, these allies because of her strength. She's getting respect not only from her hero, but from other people around her.
I think this hero also has to have a high degree of emotional intelligence. He has to have empathy. He has to be able to communicate his feelings, which alpha heroes often don't know how to do in the beginning, but he can learn it if he is an alpha. I think the supportive hero, especially a cinnamon roll, will take one look at her and be like, "Yeah, I understand exactly what you're about, and I'm here for you."
Now, is a Prince Charming character, like in the traditional Cinderellas, if we're talking about like a Disney version,
Hmm.
the hero doesn't do that much. I mean, he meets her at the ball, he falls in love, he walks around with a shoe trying to find. He seems kind of dull. He's not super bright. I don't know that he's an alpha or even supportive in the most original versions.
Yeah. Have you read? I believe this was Rebecca Witherspoon's Rafe, which was the nanny hero. You
Oh,
have.
Rafe is amazing. Yes.
That is that story and that hero perfectly fit what I think a true Cinderella heroine is, and a supportive alpha or
Is
a
he
supportive
alpha?
hero.
I feel like I don't know if he's a cinnamon roll. It's been a while since I read it, but
I think he was denoted as a cinnamon roll. Like, he is the example that
mhm.
people point to. He totally has out. I feel like he has alpha vibes, but
Okay.
he's happy to
He's a
stand
whole
back for a
male
second.
nanny, so I'm feeling male nanny and alpha don't go together, but
It worked.
the book
Rebecca
worked.
Winston worked it out because
Yes.
I think because of this, because also he's dealing with kids, so he absolutely has an emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
He's working for this high powered woman, taking orders from her, and he has absolutely no problem with it. He's like, "Sure, sweetheart, whatever you want me to do, I'm
Right.
there for you," which kind of makes the heroine brain
Scrambled.
go, "What,
Yeah.
huh?" But also there's also another thing, is that there's an equality in the relationship because he is attracted to strong women. Like, the damsel in distress would not turn this guy on. He would be like, "Oh, I can't deal with you constantly being in need of a rescue. I've got things to do." So I think that Rafe is a great example of that. You know who else is a great example of that equality and also having confidence and security within themselves in later books? Edward Cullen. You want to know
Hmm.
why?
Yes.
Yes, because in the first couple of books, no, it's a hot
Mhm.
mess. I love Twilight, but if you break those characters down, you're just like, you just want to shake these kids. But as they age and mature by the fourth book, and they're very secure in themselves and in their relationship, one of my favorite scenes is when Jacob imprints on Renesmee
Mhm.
and Bella finds out and she goes for Jacob's throat. And the other vampires all around are like, "Dude, Edward, you need to do something with your wife. Look, she's gonna hurt him." And Edward's like, "No, she's fine. Look at her. Look at her go. She's magnificent. She's so beautiful." And he just lets her handle it for a while until, she's about to go for the jugular. Then they break them apart. But he grew into that. He did not
Mhm.
start out as a supportive hero. He was very.
But also, she grew into the strength. I mean, she only does that because she's a vampire now. And before she was turned, she was just physically weak. And I think that there's different relationships between, an alpha hero. If I think you decided that Edward is alpha from the beginning. Uh, when the heroine is strong and can protect herself, and when she is needing more protection. And so he grows because she grows. I guess they grow together. I think there is a difference that's had when depending on the nature of the heroine.
Agree. So I think that nature of the heroine having that female agency or growing into that female agency, I think that's key. I think that she either starts out or becomes very decisive in both the decisions that she makes and the actions that she performs. And we know that in the beginning, Bella wasn't very decisive, but Danielle, Penelope, even Elsa, they all made a decision and they went forth with it. So that's why I think that they are such really great examples. They also challenge gender norms. Like Frozen really did that. Frozen really challenged the gender norms of our storytelling society.
Definitely.
The women, they have an emotional intelligence too, but they also, I think what makes us like them more, which makes what because you can get into the realm of the unlikable heroine. And
Hmm.
I think that the reason that these heroines don't tiptoe into that realm is because they all show vulnerability.
Hmm.
Danielle with losing her father, and also Danielle from Ever After. She wants her stepmother's love and affection.
Right.
That is her true desire for the vast majority of this film, and it is never given to her, even though she's still to the very last day, to the very last um frame of that film, you can still see she's like, oh, this was all I wanted from you, and you could
Mhm.
not give it to me. So Danielle was vulnerable. Penelope clearly is vulnerable. There's a lot of scenes of Penelope talking to the hero through that glass mirror where
Right.
he can't see her. He can just hear her as she's trying to test him to see. But she's looking at him, he's looking at himself in the mirror, and she can see that they have a connection, but she's still too scared
Hmm.
to walk past the mirrors and out that door. And we all can kind of see that. We all can kind of see, well, he can kind of fall in love with who he thinks she is, but when he finally sees who she actually is, she's still not certain that it's going to work out.
Yeah. I think that for the heroine to remain likable in these instances, it's because they're still in touch with their femininity. And I think a lot of times unlikable heroines, sometimes they lose touch. They're trying to be strong and not in touch with like traditionally feminine qualities. And readers and viewers have a hard time with that, and you can say what you will about that, like societally. But I think that the traditional feminine qualities, including vulnerability, that obviously anybody can hold, but when they're not in line with those, when they're trying to be too tough, too hard, too quote unquote masculine, that a lot of times loses the reader and the viewer in terms of finding them to be likable and really being able to engage and be on their side.
You're making me think about that the Graceling. I know we both haven't read this book in years, but I don't
Right.
remember her being very vulnerable.
Yeah, because she was an assassin,
She's
right?
an
And her grace is
assassin.
killing. I'd have to read it again. I don't remember.
Yeah, me neither.
I
But I'm
think that a lot of times in these kind of situations, when you have a really tough, especially a physically tough character who's been through emotional trauma, also, in order for them to accept love and to have the love story work, they have to have a moment of vulnerability. It has to come from somewhere, even if it's not there at the beginning. So sometimes you can create empathy with the reader with a difficult character because of the backstory, because we know they've been through something that made them this way. And the only way they can find their happiness and their peace is by releasing a little bit of that to let someone in.
For authors, that is either the save the cat moment, which happens in the beginning of the story, or a pet the dog moment, which happens more towards the middle of the story.
I think it can be, but I think sometimes it's also, I don't know the point in the romance arc, but there's a point in the romance arc where they've been fighting, 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 and finally it's significantly into the story. And then they have that moment of vulnerability where the shields are down
The
and they
mirror
can
moment.
actually accept maybe the mirror moment. Yeah.
Hmm. So with the save the cat is a method by Blake Snyder, and the whole premise or the whole theory is that you want to show you want to make your character look empathetic. So to do that, you would have them be kind to another, like even if it's a Grinch or an anti-hero, you show a moment where they are kind to another person or even to an actual cat and save them from a tree. Or with the pet the dog moment, the only difference between the save the cat and the pet the dog is the pet the dog moment happens later in the book, where you're either reminding us of why they're a cat person, or I've seen this happen in darker romances. You know, I don't read too dark, but I've seen it like when there's an anti-villain hero, and that
Anti-hero?
hero,
What's an anti-villain?
oh my god, I'm saying all the wrong words today. I've seen it when there is an anti, oh my god, an anti-hero. Yeah, an anti-hero.
Hero. Okay. I
So
just never heard of anti-villain before, but that you meant anti-hero. It's like, is that the hero?
after Thanksgiving, I'm still in my food coma. There is the anti-hero who he can have a pet the dog moment, because for pages and pages and pages, it looks like this guy doesn't care, or girl doesn't care about anything. And then you get that moment where you see like maybe a piece from their backstory that makes you understand why they are the way they are.
Mhm.
And that can be a great use of the pet the dog moment, where you see the reason why they're doing everything that they're doing, or something that they're doing specifically for the heroine or for some other sub character is revealed, and you're like, oh, that's why you're doing that. It's kind of a revelation to
Yeah.
make you see this person is a hero by showing a vulnerable bit to them later on in the story. So that's what I think that we have to do with our heroes, is even if they are alpha, I think that you need to show them as very supportive characters. And again, I think when they're alpha, that they're not immediately going to be this way, which is probably going to be the reason that he clashes with this super independent heroine. So I think with an alpha hero, they're going to clash for a minute until he starts to change.
Yeah.
And with a supportive hero, he's down for whatever she has to do. And I feel like a supportive hero kind of acts like a snowplow. I've recently learned that I'm a snowplow parent, where I know, of a 21 and a 22-year-old. And a snowplow parent like moves everything out of a person's way so that their way is easier. And I love it when I see a supportive hero do this. And the heroine's kind of like, oh, my day is going great. And she has no idea why her day is going so great. It's because he pushed everything out of her way so that she could have the life that she wants.
But sometimes with a supportive hero and a strong female character, the change, in the same way with the alpha, he has to change. In that situation, she kind of has to change, because a lot of times she's not accepting him if she's very focused on her own goals. And it's one of those stories where she doesn't need anybody, or, she doesn't want anybody. She has to recognize that she's being supported and that she actually does need it and appreciates it before the love story can continue.
You know who else I think fits this mold?
Who?
Jane Eyre.
Okay. Yeah, Jane Eyre is like a fancy Cinderella story, kind of. I don't know that Rochester is the prince, but hey.
He does nothing to save her. He provides an
Mhm.
opportunity for her,
And
and
lots
then
of
he
obstacles.
just, yeah, he is the obstacle within himself. But she wants him, and she comes, and I say this as someone who loves this story. But
Jane Eyre is
sometimes
not my favorite. I
really? I didn't know this.
can never quite like him. I'm not a fan.
Yeah. I'm a fan of her and her
Yeah.
pluck and her "I'm gonna do it and stick to itism." I'm a huge fan of that.
Mhm.
And then I think I'm a fan of his because at the end of the story, he is so wounded. And I'm a sucker for a wounded hero.
Yeah, but he's wounded and he deserves it
He
in my
does.
mind.
He does. Do you remember going to see Wide Sargasso Sea, the film?
What movie?
In film school, going to see Wide Sargasso Sea, the
No.
prequel to Jane Eyre.
I don't even know if I've heard of that before.
Oh my gosh, why do I have a memory of you, me, and Tracy going to see that?
We might have. My
You
memory
just don't
is very
Why
bad.
Sargasso Sea is the prequel book and later movie, and I think another rendition of it has been made, where you see, because if you remember in Jane Eyre, Rochester was married and trying to, make Jane his second wife without her knowing. But why Sargasso Sea shows the backstory of the air quotes love story between him and his first wife, who was Jamaican, the woman who was locked up in the attic that he didn't want anybody to know about. He's a difficult one. Maybe I need to retract.
Yeah,
Jane
keeping your mentally ill wife in the attic is a
is a
no-go for me.
problem.
That is probably why I'm not a fan.
Jane is a heroine. Rochester, yeah, dude. I tried, but
Change our minds, you know?
yeah.
I'm open to hearing why, but it's gonna have to be a good argument.
I'm not equipped to make that argument for you, Rochester. Sorry. I apologize. But I think also Disney has been moving more and more towards this type of strong, independent heroine with agency in films like Mulan and Brave and Moana.
And have you watched the newest, Cinderella? She's like a young singer starlet. It's Billy oh, what's his name?
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his last name either because
He
Billie
wears
Eilish
beautiful
is wrong.
dresses. He plays the godmother.
Yep.
I have not seen it because I heard terrible things about it, but apparently it's super woke to the point where I'm not even sure if it's a love story or not because I don't think she needs the prince at all in this movie. But it seems like that is the trajectory, yes.
I have not seen it either. Just because Ever After is my favorite and I'm good.
Yeah. No, I watch all the stupid little ones, like the modern Cinderella stories where she works in a record store or like she worked at a Christmas factory or something ridiculous.
You know what my favorite is after Ever After? My favorite Cinderella retelling, and I need to find this movie. It stars Jennifer Grey.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
If the Shoe Fits.
There are a number of movies called that, but I don't know if that's
But
the one with Jennifer
this
Grey.
is one she did the Superman thing where she would change her hair. She would like slick her hair back, and then she was the super cool fashion shoe designer. And then when her hair was like out and frizzy, she was just the plain Jane. And who's the guy that
Rob
played?
Lowe.
Thank you. Rob Lowe was the charming.
I'll have to watch that.
You will have to watch it. I hope it holds up. I haven't seen it in a while, so I could be leading you astray, and I apologize. My other favorite female heroine who fits this bill, Hermione.
Mm.
1000% the heroine, and the hero of the Harry Potter series.
I mean, yeah, she is the found family. She's the support system. She's propping everybody else up. They're riding on her laurels all the way through. I agree. Hermione should have been the hero of the entire series.
Mhm. Mhm.
She
Mhm.
really was. She's the
She really
unsung
was.
hero.
But that's pretty much my theory of this how and again, I thought that it was evolving from Cinderella, but I think this has always been the Cinderella story. But we fixate on the prince, but there's that shift from damsel in distress to a self-rescuing heroine, or a heroine who has her found family help
Mhm.
her in the rescue to get the HEA, which is the reward of the prince. She always has agency. I do love how there's diversity in the storytelling, even though neither one of us watch Billy as the fairy godmother. I appreciate
Billy
that.
Porter.
Billy Porter. I'm sorry, Billy. I'm gonna have to go watch it just so that I can be supportive because I'm so appreciative of the diversity that is now coming in
And of course, we
to.
have Brandy and Whitney Houston's
We didn't.
version.
Oh
We did
my
not talk
gosh!
about
Somebody's gonna
that.
pull our black card.
I
We
was
didn't
about to
talk
say
about.
that.
We didn't talk about Brandy and Whitney. Whoa.
And talk about diversity, she has a whole Filipino prince with a
She
black mother
does.
and a white father, and Lord only knows how the genetics worked out, but we love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and rebuy that because I don't want my black card revoked on it. Yes, Brandy 1000% and Whitney as a fairy godmother 2000%. Um, but yeah, that's what I think happens, or that's what I think is happening in storytelling. Like I said, I don't think that I understood what was happening in Cinderella because I was just so into the dress as a kid, and I was so into, oh, she's gonna have love as a kid. But now that I'm really looking at it through mature eyes, girlfriend, she was her own hero. She was her own hero.
I think it's interesting how we're in an era where we're kind of seeing a split, at least in romance. So you've got a lot more agency, a lot more women saving themselves, but then also you have the rise of super dark romances. You have the rise of things like bully romance, and alphas are just more popular than ever. Where, as much as I love a good cinnamon roll, but alphas are still at the tops of the charts. And it seems like, conventional wisdom is write an alpha, it will sell well. And I think it will. And these are not always alphas that are going to empower. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're more traditional, where it's like this universal fantasy. We talked about Theodora Taylor, who's the author of the Universal Fantasies book, that just talks about why people read, like why do we fall in love with stories. And there's a significant number of romance readers who are loving these stories where it is a damsel in distress, or maybe it's an alpha putting the woman in distress and then saving her. There's a lot of that kind of traditional that that kind of traditional romance, these same tropes, these things that have been happening for 40 years that are having a resurgence and are still extremely popular among the readers. In the same way that what we've been talking about today, the more empowered female heroine, is also extremely popular. I know there's a lot of examples of that happening. So
I
I
think
think it's interesting.
I think it's different fantasies. I
Mhm.
think the alpha doing it for you, oh, that is gonna remain my, even though I love to watch an empowered woman, having someone do it for me
Yeah.
is my fantasy. Because and it's, we're both mood readers. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm in the mood for, no, you do everything. I'm gonna lie back and you take care of it all in every room of the house. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, dude, just back up for a second. Let me see a strong woman, because
Mhm.
maybe I saw, like, I don't know, something happening on the news where men were not being cool, and
Mm.
I need to watch a woman handle her business. So I think it's a matter of what fantasy the
Yeah.
reader wants at that particular point.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either one. It's just it scratches a certain itch depending on what you have. And
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes you're going to be in the mood for something to read about this idealized version of a man that does not exist in real life, who is a
We
billionaire, a
haven't
hockey
met them
player,
all, Leslie. You don't know that.
who's going to love you forever the moment he sets eyes on you and never let you leave the house, or wrap you in cellophane and bubble wrap before you leave the house so you don't
Ugh,
so much as scratch an elbow.
I would read that every day.
Yeah. And sometimes we want Danielle with her swords to, fight off the villain herself,
And I would watch that every night.
right? Yeah.
That's perfection. That is heaven for me.
The genre, and we all contain multitudes, as does the romance genre.
Yeah, this is true. And I still can tell, we have to do a dark, we have to figure out how to do a dark and bully romance episode, because I think there's so much to unpack there. I think there's a safety in
Mm.
reading those books. I think there's a catharsis.
Mhm.
It's like, I don't like horror films, and that's and that someone explained to me that dark romance follows the same kind of trajectory of a horror film, where
Mm.
you can take it as far as you want, because you know that at the end things are going to turn out okay.
Yeah,
And I
that's a
just
good
want to
point.
get to the things are going to turn out okay. I really don't want you to go down the dark path.
Because sometimes I have read dark and I had to stop, and yeah, it's disturbing, and that's not where I'm at
Mhm,
right now. So maybe we have
mhm.
to have a guest to talk about some dark stuff. We don't have to
I think
put our
so.
brains through that.
Theodora writes dark. We could talk to her.
Right? But yeah, I think there is a catharsis there. There's exploring things you don't want to explore in real life that you can explore in the safety of the pages of a book. And that's definitely why people flock to that genre.
Yeah. Well, that was a nice ride that we just took, talking about the girls that go on their own horses.
Now it's time for everyday magic. Inez, do you have an example of magic in your everyday life?
I do. Last night I had dinner with my family, and I there's a lot of I'm from Annapolis, Maryland, go Navy. But there's a lot of my family that is in the military, specifically a lot from the Air Force. But the best thing is that the highest ranking military person in my family right now is a woman, and she ranks higher than her big brother, higher than her father, higher than our
Ooh,
uncles, and she does not make them do this, but they would technically have to salute every time she comes
nice.
into the room, and my aunts will not let it go, and it is just so much fun, and it's so lovely.
Yay. Oh, I love it. Love to hear it.
What about you, Les?
Yeah, I was having dinner last night with family friends, and they have a daughter who is 10 years old and is just the fiercest little girl you've ever met. Like, talking about female empowerment, she is going to grow up to be like this super strong woman. And it's to the point where her dad is a little concerned that the teachers are going to be like, see the strong Black woman who's child who's 10, but like growing into that and not sure how they're going to, react. And I was just like, no, this is her armor. This is how she's going to be protected in the world as a little Black girl facing whatever these teachers are going to throw at her. It is amazing. Like, nurture that. Like, yes, make it respectful. She doesn't have to be sassy and disrespectful, but she can be like positively sassy. And I just was just so impressed with her because just the personality is so different. I was extremely quiet and, as a child, very introverted. And to see someone so young be so self-possessed is actually really magical to me. And I just can't wait to see her grow up and see what amazing things she's going to do.
Maybe she'll join the military and become a general.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We hope that you are having days and days of everyday magic, not just in the books that you read, but in your personal lives as well. And we want to thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Please let us know what you think. You can leave a comment on YouTube with your thoughts on this episode. You can share it with a friend who loves romance. And don't forget to please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
And check out our book schedule on our website, inkandmagic.net, so that you can read along with us as we go through the Side Changeling series, Benalini Singh, and any other book we might be doing. And we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.